People are so bored that they start thinking about very strange things, like the Earth being flat and that we need to reach its edge. And other people say, well, let's reach the edge of the universe. And they actually organize space missions for that, just like in the movie ISRA 88-1 of the sci-fi movies released in 2016. And it starts with two people on a spaceship arguing with each other. One of them says to the other, "You can't just send all these samples into space. We're not dead." The other responds, "Maybe someone else will find them. It's fine." Then he says, "No, you've completely lost it. Anyway, there's a protocol to follow when you go crazy like this." Just as he's about to move, the other guy grabs him by the collar, and they start fighting like people brawling in the street. Harold then picks up a paper next to him, marks something on it, and puts it back. Then he puts on his clothes and a white lab coat. He starts looking at research about bees, handling bottles and papers, making it clear that he is an important figure with a significant role. At the same time, we see his friend Anderson in front of his locker. He rummages through it, sees a picture of his wife, then spots something and says, "What's this?" He opens it to find a pair of sunglasses, tries them on to see how they look, and then leaves the room. After that, Harold's sitting and eating the electric eel that's in a glass box. After eating it, he stands and stares at it for a while, and Anderson's sitting in a dark room filled with buttons, laughing and drinking alcohol. He spins around in his chair. Harold again as he goes to look out of a telescope from the spaceship. After looking through it, he doesn't see anything at all, just emptiness. After that, Anderson's sitting on the couch watching movies, surrounded by lots of alcohol bags, laughing with the remote in his hand. Harold comes from behind and makes coffee. Anderson asks, "Do you think this movie I'm watching will affect our little trip?" Harold comes beside him, removes all the alcohol bags, and sits down to drink his coffee in front of the TV. Anderson says, "Think with me, dude, rationally. We're chasing a mirage. Imagine a plane A traveling east at 85 kilometers per h, and a plane B also traveling east at 85 kilometers per h. Will either of them overtake the other?" Harold doesn't like the talk and gets up from beside him. Then Anderson's sitting, smiling, and watching TV again, while drinking more alcohol. Harold in the dark room full of buttons, playing with some buttons in front of him, while Anderson stands beside him, laughing and drinking alcohol. After Anderson leaves, Harold finishes and goes back to their room to sleep. He removes the eye mask from its place, puts it on his eyes, and falls asleep. The next day, as usual, Harold wakes up, does push-ups, then exercises, and goes to check on the electric eel. After eating it, he notices that it isn't moving as much as usual. He keeps tapping on the box, thinking it might be sleeping or didn't notice the food. He moves to tap from another spot, but his pen falls inside the box afterward. But if you were him, you'd understand that the body can't stay there for long. It would start to bloat, decompose, and cause problems on the spaceship in terms of air quality and contamination. Then, Anderson sees a light flickering on and off through the spaceship window, and he spots a massive eye, the origin of which is unclear. The director didn't explain it, leaving us confused. We're left feeling frustrated with the film's producers for leaving such a mystery. Then, Anderson sits down again after the light disappears, and we see a flashback of him and Harold on a TV show. The TV presenter asks them how they're doing in space, and what their feelings are after being chosen for the mission. They tell him they're very happy and also working on their secondary goal, which is studying the effect of gravity on bee flight and honey production in zero gravity. The TV presenter responds, "That's great. And how about the primary goal and the edge of the universe?" They reply that they're also working on that, but haven't reached anything yet. Their path looks very long with no clear end in sight. They're waiting for the stars to disappear, which would indicate they're close to something. The TV presenter says he's really happy with their progress and the mission, and appreciates that they joined him on the show and increased the advertisements. He then asks how they spend their time in boredom since they're alone together for such a long time. They tell him they had a game called Pin Pan, but unfortunately, it broke. They plan to fix it soon and thank him before ending the show. Then Anderson stands on a chair, sticks his head into some cables, and pretends to commit suicide until he actually gets electrocuted. The ship shakes, and he falls from the chair onto the cables, experiencing a real near-death situation. Luckily, the cables broke and saved him from a fatal accident. He remains seated, shocked by what just happened, and the close call with death. Then, a huge light appears through the spaceship window. But again, the director doesn't clarify what the light is, where it's coming from, or its significance to the film. This leaves viewers frustrated with the film's producers for the lack of explanation. A flashback of Anderson talking to a woman about the mission and his role in it. We then see nurses conducting tests on him while he's exhausted and unable to stand due to the pressure he's under. She tells him, "Come on, hero," and at the same time, a military person is standing around, doing nothing but talking, showing no concern for others. The military person tells Anderson that this is a national security mission and emphasizes that he needs to make it clear from the start that he is just a regular citizen and not representing the military or the US. He also warns that any dangerous information must be kept hidden. Otherwise, there will be consequences and trouble for him. They then prepare to complete the tests. And another flashback of a conference where the same woman is discussing the mission she wants to undertake to discover the edge of space. Anderson raises his hand to ask a question, and she invites him to come and join her. She mentions that Anderson has written a fascinating and impressive research on electric eels and expresses hope that everyone knows he is part of a significant mission that will change the course of history. Someone then asks the relevance of the project and the risks involved. She responds by asking, "What should we waste state resources on? Health, education, food, and water, or something else?" She then announces that Anderson will be partnered with Harold, who is from the military and will be the pilot of the mission. They take a group photo, and she tells them that she wants them at a crucial meeting after the conference. Anderson undergoing tests and examinations, struggling from exhaustion. Harold enters rudely, telling him that he needs to exercise and stay active because the takeoff will be challenging given his poor condition. Meanwhile, military personnel have Anderson sign some papers while he is lying on the ground. He then thanks Harold, saying he doesn't like training and prefers physics. The woman stands in front of them and expresses her optimism about the mission. Harold on the spaceship, performing his role in the mission. He monitors some indicators and wears a lab coat to feel like a real scientist. He plays and eats the electric eel. Anderson then tells him, "You know, I once saw a video of a sea snake killing a crocodile. It kept wrapping around the crocodile until it got close enough to its jaws. The crocodile bit it, but then lost control, and the snake electrocuted it until it died." Harold responds, "I feel like you're upset that I'm eating the eel." Anderson says, "No, why would I be upset? I'm just concerned that you're not following the safety instructions that are supposed to protect us." We then see them sitting, with Anderson watching the same movie for the umpteenth time, while Harold walks by, bored, and starts doing exercises. In present, where Anderson is bored and gets up to look out of the spaceship window at the stars through the telescope. After a while, he sits back down, still feeling frustrated and unsure of what to do next. A flashback of Anderson collecting the sardines that Harold was feeding to fish and throwing them into the trash disposal area. He then asks Harold, "What are you doing? Do you think these buttons actually do anything? Tell me, what does this button do?" Harold responds that it doesn't matter as long as they follow the instructions and press everything at the right time, which makes a red light turn on. Anderson tells him not to press it and see what happens. Anderson insists on not leaving him alone, but Harold hits him and grabs him, and Anderson laughs, saying, "See, you hit me and didn't press the button. The button turned off and nothing happened. This mission is all automated. The machinery is either programmed or controlled remotely. Do you think they'd let you pilot the spaceship on your own?" Anderson leaves, making Harold feel shocked and upset. Harold looks around and finds that everything is still functioning normally and nothing has happened. Why did they put them on the spaceship when they control everything? The next day, Harold goes to sleep, indifferent to Anderson, who is lying on the couch. When he wakes up in the morning, he asks where the sardines are, and Anderson replies that he threw them all into space. Harold grabs him by the shirt and asks if he's going to hit him. Anderson notes that Harold has already hit him before, so it doesn't make much of a difference. However, Harold then takes a photo of Anderson's wife from his pocket and tears it up. This action shocks Anderson and upsets him deeply, as it was one of his most cherished belongings. The day passes with Anderson asleep and Harold playing with and eating the eel. Both are isolated and upset, with the journey starting to take its toll. Later, Harold hears a strange noise while sleeping, gets up and follows the sound. He finds himself surrounded by many people he doesn't recognize and has no idea where they came from or what they are doing there. He is unsure if these are hallucinations, the effects of alcohol, or something else entirely. It turns out to be a dream, and the two astronauts in the dream are thanking the world for the opportunity. They mention that future books will talk about their journey to find the end of space. They decide to celebrate the event, and one of them approaches Anderson, puts his hand in his pocket, and gives him a bag of alcohol. Anderson drinks from the bags and gets drunk, losing awareness. After the first night of heavy drinking, he wakes up to find Harold making 2 cups of coffee. Harold wakes Anderson, gives him his cup, and sits down to drink his own. Anderson takes his cup, drinks, and begins to come to his senses. Then, each of them gets up to figure out what to do. Harold presses the buttons he's supposed to press, even though he doesn't understand their purpose, and records the readings in the logbooks. Then, Anderson conducting research on the bees in the lab and checking if their honey production is ongoing. Afterwards, they look at the stars from various points in the spaceship, noting that they are visible everywhere. They realize that their journey is far from over. Anderson, feeling disheartened, decides to go to bed. Both of them end their day and go to sleep. The next day, both of them wake up, with Harold starting his exercises as usual, maintaining his disciplined military routine. Anderson looks at the broken game beside Harold and wonders if they will manage to fix it while they continue doing nothing productive. The film portrays a pervasive sense of boredom affecting both Anderson and the viewers, including those who produced and directed it. We see Anderson moving around and fiddling with things in the room, finding nothing useful to do, while Harold is amused by his own situation. He goes to take readings from the instruments and records them, then checks to make sure the fans are working. He eats the snake in the tank while wearing his lab coat. Afterwards, he prepares 2 meals and heats up food for himself and Anderson. He asks Anderson how the day is going, to which Anderson responds that it's the same as always wasting time and nothing productive is happening. Harold replies that as long as people like Anderson don't make an effort, things will remain as they are. Anderson ignores him, knowing that everything going on is pointless and that they're not achieving anything useful. Anderson adjusts himself on the couch and tells Harold that he needs to do something today, hoping that Harold will actually take action. Then, Anderson says he will fix the pin-pan game and earn some good karma, suggesting that Harold might be less bored if he does something productive. Anderson working on the game, which emits smoke, but he doesn't seem worried and continues as usual. Meanwhile, Harold is still deceiving himself by pretending to do something productive. He fiddles with the buttons, records readings, and sits in the chair as if he's controlling the ship, though it's unclear what he's really achieving. Later, we see Anderson again. But this time the machine starts to catch fire and emit smoke, posing a serious risk to the ship and almost killing them. Afterward, we see Harold heading towards the snake tank, continuing to eat sardines and wasting their supplies on an animal that could potentially kill them. Once he finishes, he goes outside and Anderson asks him if he fixed the game. Harold responds that he didn't, but he made a necklace from the machine's wires and a couple of similar-looking charms. Anderson, annoyed, responds with sarcasm about the necklace and then goes to search the closet, finding a picture of his wife. He is overjoyed because he thought it was lost. You're right, there's a flashback showing that Harold had cut the picture before this incident. Anderson watching TV. He imagines himself acting in the show with his wife, entering and saying, "I came from work, and there's nothing to eat? We've been married for 10 years. The most a man wants after a long day at work is a hot meal." His wife responds, "You see, every time you accuse me, I have the food in the oven to keep it warm until you come." Anderson apologizes, saying, "It's my fault. I'm sorry." The next day, as Anderson is heading to work, his wife reminds him to take his jacket, then his hat, only to finally tell him that today is a day off and there's no work. Frustrated, he returns home and finds Harold coming in, acting as if he doesn't understand anything. Even though Harold is confused, he has no authority over Anderson. Anderson treats Harold as he should, telling him, "Imagine the situation, Harold. Wealth turned out to be linked to memory. Check out this article. They keep looking at memory test cards all the time, but the alarm keeps waking them up constantly." Harold wakes up, makes his bed, and Anderson leaves him as usual. Harold then goes to exercise as he does every day, and afterwards Anderson prepares food. Harold asks him if he will sit around all day as usual, or if there's something to do. Anderson replies that today he needs to work with the bees. Anderson works with the bees, conducts research, and plays with them, while Harold continues to be absorbed in buttons and readings, wondering what else can be eaten with honey besides bread. Anderson continuing his work with the bees, and after finishing, he checks on the snake as part of his routine. He then looks out from all the windows of the ship to see what's going on. He ends up hanging a picture of his wife on the window so that it remains in his view. He then goes to Harold to update him and finds out that nothing has changed. They're still moving in a straight line with nothing happening. He says, "God help you, Harold, for sitting behind all these screens and buttons every day all day long." A flashback to a time when they playing a game of pin-pan before it breaks down. Each one writes their score, and then the other player takes their turn. They pass by the sun that day too, and then they used to sleep, wake up, and work energetically. Anderson goes on to research honey, extracting it from the bees and ensuring it's safe for human consumption before eating it. He collects the honey for Harold too, feeling very proud of his production. Later, Harold is called, leaves what he's doing, and thinks there's a problem. He finally decides to do something on the ship and finds Anderson playing with the bees. Anderson shows Harold a beard made of bees, asking if Harold can make one too. Harold leaves him and takes a tour of the ship, going to the place where Anderson always goes. He mentions that he doesn't come here often because he doesn't like the place. His heart tightens when he sees the vast emptiness of space ahead. Then they sit down for a while, enjoying the view of the stars and the universe around them. After they finish, Harold finds that Anderson has achieved a very high score in the game and asks him, "What's this, master?" He suspects Anderson must have changed something in the game or tampered with it. Anderson responds, "Just sit there and laugh at yourself if you want to feel like you're better at playing than me." Later, they sit together and eat honey for the first time. Harold tells Anderson he's doing great and praises him. Then he notices photos of Anderson's wife and asks, "Is it really worth leaving her behind?" Anderson replies, "I didn't leave her. She left me. I wanted to get as far away as possible, so I decided to come here." Anderson unable to sleep at night due to anxiety, and he starts playing the game. Harold wakes up to the sound and finds Anderson playing, having reached an impressive score. He encourages him as the game starts making noise. When the game stops making noise, they realize that the sound isn't from the game, but from the lab. They find out that the bees have died, and they lament the loss, making it a bad day. Afterward, as they talk before going to sleep, Harold asks Anderson why his wife left him. Anderson explains, "Because I loved joking around and wanted her to joke with me. I wanted our relationship to be lighthearted. I didn't want everything at home to be serious. I wanted it to feel like a different world from the street I was on all day." Harold finds Anderson's sketchbook filled with drawings of himself dead. The next day, Anderson tells him, "I feel like we're not on a spaceship. How about we cut some wires and see what happens?" Harold argues with him, saying, "Stop this nonsense. You want to kill me. I've seen your drawings." Anderson replies, "I don't want to kill you. These images just come to my mind when I'm sitting here and I draw them. I've seen you dying by the sink many times, and each time it looks very real." Later, Harold goes to the sink and says, "It doesn't make sense. What could make me die by the sink like this?" He then goes to the sink, puts his hand inside, and gets bitten by the snake, realizing what could potentially kill him. Anderson cutting the wires he wanted to cut. After that, the ship starts shaking as it reaches the edge of the universe and breaks through the barrier. The problem is that Americans are trying to convince you that there is a box we are living in, and they are the ones who made it. It has an end, but you won't reach it, while they are able to reach it because they created it. Then we see Anderson at home with his wife, rejecting the government's offer to join a space mission to discover the end of the universe. This suggests that when Anderson learned the truth about the universe's end, he feared that someone had discovered the ultimate truth and returned to alter events so that Anderson would not go on the mission. Consequently, two other individuals, apart from Anderson and Harold, end up going on the mission, causing chaos and their spaceship exploding as soon as they launch. Well, really frustrated with the writer, director, producer, and all the actors. If you know a better film, please let us know and we'll summarize it for you right away.